Part 1, December 26th, 1944, 50 in the afternoon, Assenois, Belgium. First Lieutenant Charles Boggess is inside a Sherman tank. Smoke fills the road ahead. Splintered trees line both sides. Snow is falling. He can hear machine gun fire from the woods. He can hear artillery. He can hear men dying in the village behind him. He keeps driving. 2 more Shermans follow. 1 half-track that shouldn't be here at all follows those. 2 more tanks trail behind the half-track at distance, separated by 300 yards of empty road from the rest of the column. The men who were supposed to be with Boggess are still fighting in Assenois. Still fighting Assenois. It's most of the battalion buried in a street battle that was supposed to be over by now. What pushes toward the American lines at this moment is not a relief column. It is 6 vehicles moving through smoke, separated from their support, with a road full of German mines behind them, and an objective ahead that 18,000 surrounded Americans have been waiting 6 days to see. This is the moment the legend calls inevitable. It was not inevitable. It was barely possible. Every man in that tank grew up during the Depression. Every man knew someone who would not come home. And on December 26th, 1944, 6 vehicles carrying a handful of men were about to become the answer to a question that the most experienced German commander in the war had already decided was unanswerable. Understanding why requires going back to a decision made in September in a room far from Belgium by a man who already knew the answer. Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt is 69 years old. He has worn a uniform for more than 5 decades. He served under the Kaiser. He worked on the German General Staff during the First World War. He commanded army groups in Poland, France, and the Soviet Union. He has seen what armies can do and what they cannot. When Hitler presents him with the plan for a massive Ardennes offensive in the autumn of 1944, Rundstedt reads it and reaches a conclusion that professional experience forces him toward. The Wehrmacht does not have what this plan requires. He does not say this with drama. He puts it in writing. He proposes an alternative, what he calls the kleine Lösung, the small solutions, a more limited encirclement that German forces might actually complete, rather than a drive all the way to Antwerp. He submits his analysis through proper channels. Hitler rejects it. The plan remains as Hitler designed it, and von Rundstedt is required to execute a campaign he has already identified as exceeding Germany's available means. This matters, because the sentence that gives this story its title, the claim that von Rundstedt told Hitler that Patton's relief of Bastogne was tactically impossible, does not exist in any reliable wartime document. No transcript preserves it. No staff record confirms it. The sentence has lived in books and documentaries for decades as though it was spoken in a room where people were writing things down. What does exist is more honest. On December 31st, 1944, 5 days after the American corridor opens, the Obi West War Diary records the following assessment. If Bastogne cannot be taken, the offensive operation is finished. Not a prediction, a confirmation. Von Rundstedt is not telling Hitler what will happen. He is writing down what has already happened. The fortress held, the relief arrived, the offensive is finished. The line that history remembers as prophecy was actually an obituary. But the judgment behind the legend is real, and to understand it, you have to understand what Bastogne meant to the German plan and why losing it destroyed something that could never be recovered. 7 roads meet at Bastogne. 7. Roads running toward Hofelies, Marche, Neufchâteau, Clairvaux, Saint-Vith, and points between. In a region of dense forests and narrow valleys, road junctions are not administrative conveniences. They are the arteries through which tanks receive fuel, infantry receives ammunition, and wounded men travel east. The German offensive requires speed above everything else. Surprise, not strength, is what makes the plan viable. Every hour of delay is fuel burned, every blocked road is a division stalled, every stalled division is an army that cannot reach the Meuse. General Hasso von Manteuffel, 47 years old, commands the 5th Panzer Army. He understands the geometry better than almost anyone. His fastest columns can bypass Bastogne. They have to. Speed is the mission, but the formations behind them cannot ignore what sits in the middle of their supply network. A surrounded American garrison that refuses to fall is not a nuisance. It is a fortress embedded in the southern shoulder of the penetration, threatening every convoy, every fuel truck, every reinforcement column that needs to move west. If Bastogne falls, Manteuffel gains the road network and the momentum to widen the salient. If Bastogne holds, the fortress becomes a permanent drain on German attention seeking, German forces, and German time. In a plan where time is the only resource that cannot be replaced, Bastogne is the place where time begins to die. The plan that requires the capture of Bastogne is already in motion on December 16th, when German artillery opens along a front more than 80 miles wide before dawn. Searchlights angle into low cloud, the beams reflect back from the overcast, spreading pale light over frozen fields and dark forest. German infantry crosses the Our River through fog. American telephone wires are cut in the first minutes. Command posts lose contact with forward units. 2 regiments of the 106th Infantry Division, inexperienced and in the wrong position, face encirclement in the Schnee Eifel. The veteran 28th Infantry Division fights from scattered villages it cannot hold. The 99th Infantry Division and elements of the 2nd Infantry Division block routes near the Elsenborn Ridge and refuse to give ground even when everything around them is collapsing, says American headquarters first interprets the assault as a large local counterattack. Then the reports multiply, roads fill with refugees and retreating soldiers and abandoned guns. The scale of what has happened becomes impossible to misread. The Germans expect their armor to be across the Muses by the end of the second day. It does not happen. The Elsenborn Ridge holds. St. Vith holds far longer than German planners allowed for. Engineers blow bridges, isolated platoons fight until their ammunition is gone. Traffic jams form behind German spearheads, division stacked behind division on roads built for farm wagons. The offensive drives deep into the American center, but the timetable shatters almost immediately, and the shattered timetable is the first sign that something in the German plan has already gone wrong. On December 17th, Supreme Allied Headquarters orders the 82nd and 101st Airborne Divisions north from their rest areas. Both divisions have just completed 72 days of brutal combat in the Netherlands. They are recovering. The 101st Commander, Major General Maxwell Taylor, is in Washington. The officer who will lead the division into Bastogne is Brigadier General Anthony McAuliffe, 46 years old, the division's artillery commander. He has never commanded the division in combat. Trucks are gathered from supply units and headquarters. The paratroopers load in the dark, in the rain, moving toward a battlefield whose boundaries no American headquarters can define. Many of the men lack winter boots, many lack heavy coats, some units are short of ammunition. The 501st Parachute Infantry Regiment moves first, then the 506th and 502nd, then the Glider Regiment and the artillery and the engineers. They ride through night and rain toward a place they know only by name. What waits at Bastogne is not a clean defensive position with clear lines and full ammunition. What waits is a collection of fragments. Colonel William Roberts commands Combat Command B of the 10th Armored Division, with tanks and armored infantry and artillery divided into 3 teams. Survivors from the 9th Armored Division and the 28th Infantry Division are streaming in from positions that no longer exist. Clerks, cooks, military police, and mechanics are pulled from support jobs and handed rifles. What forms around Bastogne in those first days is not a garrison, it is everything that could be gathered before the roads closed it. By December 21st, the roads are closed. German forces cut the last route south, west, north, and east of the town. Inside the perimeter, somewhere between 18 and 22,000 American soldiers are surrounded, though no one can count them precisely because the situation is too fluid for accurate records. The 101st Airborne forms the core. The tank destroyers of the 705th Battalion cover the armor approaches. Artillery battalions concentrate their guns near the center. Medical facilities work past capacity. Fuel is scarce. Food is limited. Artillery ammunition is the most urgent concern because German attacks can only be broken if the guns keep firing. McAuliffe receives one order from 8th Corps Commander Major General Troy Middleton. Hold Bastogne. 2 words. No elaboration, because elaboration is not possible. No reinforcements are coming. No relief has been organized. No one knows in the final days before Christmas whether relief will arrive before the garrison exhausts its ability to resist. Far to the south, in the city of Luxembourg, a different calculation is being made. George S. Patton Jr. is 59 years old. Third Army has spent months driving across France through Lorraine, reducing the fortress city of Metz. The next attack is supposed to breach the Siegfried Line in the Saar. Patton has been planning that attack for weeks. On December 18th, General Omar Bradley calls him to Luxembourg and explains that the situation in the Ardennes is worse than reported. Patton says he can intervene with 3 divisions and quickly. He picks up the telephone and calls his Chief of Staff, Brigadier General Hobart Gay. He tells Gay to stop the Saar operation. The 4th Armored Division begins moving north before midnight. One combat command is already on the road toward Longwy before Patton has received a formal mission. The famous turn has not been ordered yet, and Third Army is already turning. During the night of December 18th and into the 19th, Gay and the 3rd Army staff prepare 3 counterattack options. One route runs from Neufchâteau towards Saint-Hubert, one runs from Arlon toward Bastogne, one runs from Luxembourg through Diekirch towards Saint-Vith. Maps change, core boundaries shift. Fuel dumps, hospitals, traffic control posts, artillery, bridging units, ammunition routes, and maintenance services must all be redirected simultaneously. An army that was attacking east must now attack north. Its supply lines run east. Its hospitals are positioned for a different front. Its reserves are staged for a different battle. What is about to happen is not a tank column making a right turn on a highway. It is an army disengaging from active combat, transferring part of its front to another force, moving headquarters and divisions up to 70 miles over winter roads, and attacking into terrain that Third Army reconnaissance units have not studied, against German forces whose positions are not fully known, before the logistical structure required for a deliberate assault has been built. Doctrine calls this controlled chaos. The doctrine is not wrong. On the morning of December 19th, Eisenhower meets with Bradley, Patton, and other senior officers at Verdun. Eisenhower asks how quickly Third Corps can attack. The legend says Patton promises a full assault in 48 hours. The official record is more precise. Patton says he can begin a piecemeal attack in 3 days and a coordinated attack in 6. Eisenhower expects the main counterattack to come on December 23rd or 24th, and he considers Patton's confidence excessive. Patton is given responsibility for the southern counterattack with at least 2 corps and 6 divisions. He returns to his headquarters with a mission, a timetable, and the knowledge that the garrison holding Bastogne may not survive long enough for a coordinated attack to reach them. He does not wait for coordination. Third Army is already moving, and the first obstacle it hits is not German. Pipette 2, the shortest road from Arlon to Bastogne, is 12 miles. In the summer, on a paved highway, a Sherman tank covers 12 miles in half an hour. In December of 1944, those 12 miles contain demolished bridges, iced ridgelines, pine forests, minefields, anti-tank guns, and several German divisions. The mathematics of distance and time that work on a staff map do not survive contact with a Belgian winter. General Hugh Gaffey commands the 4th Armoured Division. The division is famous for speed, and it is not fresh. It has fought from the Normandy hedgerows through Lorraine and only recently pulled back for maintenance and rest. Tank engines have absorbed hundreds of miles beyond their designed service life. Tracks are worn. Transmissions have been rebuilt. Crews that were together in France have been replaced in part by men who arrived during the autumn. The division is short of infantry and medium tanks. It carries the reputation of an elite formation and the mechanical reality of a unit that has been running hard since August. Gaffey commits Combat Command A on the main Arlon-Bastogne highway, Combat Command B on secondary roads to the west, and Combat Command Reserve as a balanced force behind both. Patton wants speed. Speed means advancing into terrain that Third Army's reconnaissance units have not adequately studied. It means attacking before the ideal conditions are established, because waiting for ideal conditions is the same as deciding that Bastogne does not. On December 22nd, 3 Corps attacks across a front nearly 30 miles wide. The 26th Infantry Division pushes through the center. The 80th Infantry Division advances on the right. The 4th Armored Division attacks on Combat Command A reaches Martelange. At the edge of the town, the lead vehicles stop. The bridge is gone. The bridge over the Shaw River at Martelange was not demolished by German engineers or destroyed by German artillery. American engineers blew it days earlier on orders that made complete sense at the time to slow the German advance. The decision was correct for the week it was made. It is catastrophic for this week. A gorge drops below the broken span. German paratroopers of the 5th Parachute Division defend the terraces above the far bank. Armored infantry can cross part of the wreckage, but tanks cannot. The gorge is too deep for a quick crossing solution. Engineers must build a 90-foot Bailey Bridge while shells fall and the traffic jam behind them stretches for miles. Most of December 23rd disappears at a river that Americans destroyed themselves. The decision that blocked the fastest route to Bastogne was made by the same army that needs to use it. That is not a failure of planning. It is the character of a campaign that moves too fast for any single headquarters to track all the consequences. The bridge at Martelange is the first indication that the relief of Bastogne will not look like the relief described in the operations order. Combat Command B advances on secondary roads toward Chaumont. The ground freezes hard enough for tanks during the night, but daylight brings thawing mud. Bazooka teams wait in the hedges. Anti-tank guns cover the roads from the hills. The Americans prepare a deliberate assault on Chaumont with artillery support and fighter bombers and armored infantry. The attack works, the village falls. For a moment, Chaumont is taken and the road beyond it is open. Then the Germans come back. 10 to 15 assault guns of the 11th Assault Gun Brigade descend from the wooded heights behind a screen of smoke, infantry clinging to their hulls. Their 75mm guns fire directly into Shermans that are already stuck in mud and narrow village streets. The American forward artillery observer is killed in the first minutes. With the observer gone, the link to supporting guns is severed. The guns that could break up the counterattack cannot find their targets. Houses burst open under direct fire. Sherman crews scramble from burning vehicles. Company A of the 10th Armored Infantry Battalion loses approximately 65 men. 11 Shermans are abandoned in the mud and left to German crew. First Lieutenant Charles Boggess, the company's only surviving officer, stays behind to cover the withdrawal. He is killed. Combat Command B falls back through darkness. The formation that was supposed to lead the relief effort has just been thrown out of a village within sight of its objective. Inside the perimeter on December 22nd, German soldiers approach the lines of the 327th Glider Infantry under a white flag. They carry a written demand for surrender. The document is formal and professional. It warns of annihilation. It offers the garrison 2 hours to reply. McAuliffe reads the ultimatum, looks up, and says one word: nuts. Colonel Joseph Harper carries the reply back to the German officers. When they ask him to explain the term, Harper does not hesitate. He tells them it means the same as go to hell, and suggests they begin walking before his men start shooting. The German officers depart. The story moves through American lines in hours. In a campaign that has produced almost nothing except loss and encirclement and retreat, the single word becomes something the garrison can put in its hands and hold on to. But Defiance does not refill ammunition racks. The planned supply drop on December 22nd fails because of weather. Artillery units begin rationing shells, surgeons work in cellars with inadequate instruments and insufficient plasma. The wounded lie on floors under blankets taken from men who are still fighting. German patrols probe the perimeter for weak points every night. McAuliffe's answer has to be defended with weapons that are running empty. On December 23rd, the weather changes. The overcast that has protected German movement and grounded Allied aircraft since December 16th begins to break. A Pathfinder team parachutes into the perimeter and establishes a landing beacon. Shortly before noon, 241 C-47 transport aircraft approach Bastogne from the south, each carrying approximately 1,200 pounds of supplies. Parachutes open over the snow. Some bundles drift beyond American lines and fall into German hands. But thousands of artillery rounds, medical supplies, food rations, and small arms ammunition reach the garrison. P-47 Thunderbolts attack German positions and road columns for the first time since the offensive began. The same sky that protected the German advance is now an American weapon. Every road leading into the Ardennes is visible from altitude. Every fuel convoy, every ammunition column, every division moving toward the battle is exposed to aircraft that cannot be stopped. Rundstedt's armies have pushed farthest west at precisely the moment they lose the protection that made their advance possible. Combat Command Reserve was not designed to be the instrument of relief. Its mission is to protect the flanks of the advancing combat commands, to follow behind the breakthrough and secure the corridor. Its core is 2 battalion commanders. Lieutenant Colonel Creighton Abrams commands the 37th Tank Battalion. He is 30 years old. Lieutenant Colonel George Jacques commands the 53rd Armored Infantry Battalion. Together, their force represents the reserve that was supposed to exploit a success that the leading combat commands have not yet achieved. By December 23rd and 24th, the reserve is the only formation still capable of sustained movement. Combat Command A is stalled at a destroyed bridge that will require days to repair. Combat Command B is recovering from a defeat. The reserve takes over secondary roads east of the main axis, moving through Remy-Champagne, looking for a route that the leading elements failed to find. On Christmas Eve and Christmas Day, the pattern of near failure repeats. Combat Command A fights through Warnack toward the Arlon Road. Combat Command B recovers from Chaumont and attacks again. The 26th Infantry Division struggles toward the shore. German reserves move into the southern shoulder of the salient. Inside the perimeter, enemy tanks break through the western defenses near Champs and Hemmerle. German armor fires directly into American positions at close range. Bazooka teams hunt tanks between frozen hedges. Artillery crews lower their guns and fire over open sights. Snow turns grey and black around burning vehicles. Men fight in farmyards where the frozen earth splashes like broken stone under mortar rounds. On the evening of December 25th, after 6 days of siege and 3 days of failed relief attempts, McAuliffe makes the call to Middleton. We have been let down. It is not a statement of despair. It is a statement of fact. The garrison still holds, but the situation inside the perimeter is deteriorating daily. German commanders are assembling additional forces for renewed attacks. Hitler has transformed Bastogne in his mind from a road junction that should be bypassed into a symbol whose capture can restore credibility to an offensive that has already failed on its original term. Rundstedt and Model both understand that the drive to Antwerp is finished. The Meuse has not been crossed. Allied reserves have assembled on both flanks. German fuel stocks are critically low. But Hitler continues ordering offensive action because admitting failure at Bastogne means admitting failure everywhere. The German formations that were supposed to split the Allied armies are now defending the sides of a salient that grows less sustainable by the hour. Bastogne is the last place where local victory might still produce something Germany can call a result. If the town falls, the battle can be described in Berlin as a partial success. If it holds, the entire design collapses into a strategic withdrawal that consumed men and equipment Germany cannot replace. December 26th, early afternoon, Remy-Champagne. Combat Command Reserve has been moving through secondary roads for 3 days. Its objective, according to the current plan, is Sibret, a village southwest of Bastogne. From Sibret, the force can threaten German positions around the perimeter and support the wider advance. The road to Sibret leads northwest. It is longer than the direct route. The direct route goes through Assenois, so Abrams and Jacques stand beside the road. Above them, formations of transport aircraft are flying northeast, C-47s heading toward Bastogne on another supply mission, their paths visible through a break in the clouds. The 2 battalion commanders watch the aircraft pass. Bastogne is northeast. The plan says Sibret. The aircraft are heading toward the garrison. The garrison has been encircled for 6 days. Abrams reaches for his radio and calls Captain William Dwight, the operations officer of the 37th Tank Battalion. He tells Dwight to bring forward the C Team, Company C of the 37th Tank Battalion, and Company C of the 53rd Armored Infantry Battalion. He tells him this is the push. The plan says Sibret. Abrams says Assenois. No general is on the radio authorizing the change. No staff officer has updated the operations order. 2 lieutenant colonels standing beside a road in the Belgian winter, watching supply aircraft fly toward a garrison that has been waiting 6 days, make the decision that determines whether the relief succeeds. 13 artillery batteries begin coordinating fires. The support is assembled under severe communications limitations, with forward observers in positions that can only see part of the terrain. At 4:20 in the afternoon, the force moves out. Sherman's in the lead. Half-tracks close behind, artillery observers on the radio, passing grid coordinates to batteries miles away. At 4:35, Boggess calls from the lead tank. Abrams gives the signal. 10 volleys crash into Assenois in rapid successions. 8 German anti-tank guns are positioned in and around the village, but the concentration of fire suppresses their crews before they can organize. The Shermans enter Assenois immediately behind the last barrage, so close that 155mm shells are still exploding in the center of the village when the tanks reach the edge. Smoke turns afternoon into something closer to night. 2 Shermans take a wrong turn and disappear down a side street. A half-track is struck by fragments from American artillery, and the men inside are killed or wounded. Armored infantry dismounts and fights through the streets as German soldiers emerge from cellars. The battle becomes a close-quarters struggle in smoke and dust. The infantry that was supposed to follow the tanks through the village is now pinned inside it. Dwight's instructions to Boggess are clear: keep moving. Boggess leads 3 Shermans north out of the village. 1 half-track that missed the turn follows by accident. 2 more tanks trail behind. The column that carries the fate of Bastogne now consists of 6 vehicles. 300 yards of empty road opens between the lead tanks and the last vehicles behind them. German soldiers appear at the roadside and throw telemines. The half-track hits one and explodes, killing and wounding the men inside. Dwight pulls his vehicle onto the shoulder, dismounts under fire, and removes mines from the road by hand so the trailing tanks can pass. The 3 lead Shermans cross a railroad embankment and follow the road toward the perimeter. Boggess fires his machine guns into tree lines on both sides. The smoke from Assenois drifts north behind them. At 4:50 in the afternoon, Boggess sees soldiers in American uniforms ahead. He does not know in the first second whether they are American or German in captured gear. He slows. The soldiers rise from their positions. They belong to the 326th Airborne Engineer Battalion. They have been fighting inside the Bastogne perimeter for 6 days. They are staring at a Sherman tank emerging from the smoke and snow, and for a moment, neither side moves. Then recognition passes between them. The Siege of Bastogne is over. Part 3. The corridor is not a highway. It is a road through which 6 vehicles have just passed, with a burning half-track at one end and a village full of ongoing combat at the other. 20 minutes after Boggess stops beside the engineers, Abrams reaches the perimeter and finds McAuliffe. Behind Abrams, Jacques and the 53rd Armored Infantry Battalion are still fighting inside Assenois. The battle in the village will continue for hours, but the physical line is broken. More than 200 vehicles are waiting near Rossignol. 40 supply trucks and 70 ambulances enter Bastions before midnight, moving under escort through a corridor that German artillery can reach from both sides. The men inside the garrison have been rationing ammunition, eating what was dropped by parachute, working in surgical cellars without enough instruments or plasma, and fighting off armored attacks with weapons that were running low for days. The trucks arrive. The wounded begin moving out. The corridor is narrow and exposed and dangerous, but it is open. The legend says this is where the story ends. It does not end here. German forces understand what the corridor means. If it can be closed, Bastogne can be isolated again. Formations converge on the Assinois road from the woods to the east and west. Artillery strikes the convoys moving through. Mines remain beneath the snow, some of them not yet located. Infantry from the 26th and 35th Infantry Divisions moves forward to widen the Quartz Passage. Combat Command A of the 9th Armored Division joins the effort. The 4th Armored Division fights to connect its scattered combatants and establish alternative routes. For several days, every vehicle entering Bastogne travels through a passage that a single successful armored thrust could set. The celebration inside Bastogne is quieter than the accounts written later suggest. The cost of reaching the town is not a number that produces celebration. Roughly 1,000 men of the 4th Armored Division are killed or wounded during the drive from the Shore River to the perimeter. The 37th Tank Battalion loses men and vehicles throughout the operation. The 53rd Armored Infantry Battalion suffers dozens killed and approximately 180 wounded. Company C of the 37th Tank Battalion ends the relief operation with a handful of functioning tanks. The division reaches Bastogne not because it is untouched, but because it keeps attacking after it is damaged. Combat Command A loses a day at a destroyed bridge. Combat Command B is thrown out of Chaumont on Christmas Eve. The reserve changes direction twice. A weakened battalion group finds a less defended approach through a village that wasn't in the original plan. The success is not the clean execution of the design that Patton described on December 19th. It is what happens when an institution refuses to stop producing another attempt after every previous attempt has failed. This is the reality that the sentence about von Rundstedt is trying to capture. Patton's relief looks impossible to any experienced commander examining it from the outside because of what the operation actually requires. An army must disengage from one battle and attack in a different direction. Divisions must arrive at the front at different times and attack before they are concentrated. Intelligence about German positions is fragmentary. The terrain has not been reconnoitered. Bridges are destroyed. Winter weather degrades engines and roads and aircraft availability. The garrison inside the perimeter may exhaust its defensive capacity before the relief column arrives. The leading combat command is already at reduced strength. German units can reinforce the southern shoulder from the east. By every conventional measure of what a major offensive requires, the conditions are wrong. Yet Third Army performs multiple stages of warfare simultaneously. It disengages from combat in the Saar, it moves divisions over winter roads, it reorganizes supply lines, it attacks into unscouted terrain. It does all of this at the same time, accepting that none of these things will be done as well as doctrine prefers, because waiting until doctrine is satisfied is a success as deciding that Bastogne can wait. Rundstedt's problem runs in the opposite direction. The German offensive requires precision and achieves congestion. Panzer divisions move on roads already crowded with horse-drawn vehicles, fuel trucks, infantry on foot, and broken equipment. Units receive conflicting priorities. The 2nd Panzer Division is ordered toward the Meuse even as Bastogne threatens its supply routes. The 26th Volksgrenadier Division must attack the town after marching on foot behind faster armor. 7th Army must protect an expanding southern flank with forces that were never enough. Every American roadblock forces German columns onto worse routes. Every lost hour burns fuel that cannot be replaced at. Every local success pulls formations away from an objective that was already unreachable. By December 26th, Hitler's plan still exists on paper. The battlefield has replaced it with a struggle to keep the salient from collapsing. Hitler does not accept the operational meaning of Bastogne's relief. He orders renewed attacks on the town. He directs German formations to converge on the corridor and seal it again. The 15th Panzer Grenadier Division and additional units strike both the corridor and the perimeter. American infantry and armor and artillery fight through the final days of December and into January. Snow deepens. Frostbite and trenchfoot remove men as efficiently as bullets. Artillery bursts in the treetops, showering foxholes with splinters that wound without warning. The road is open. The battle is not finished. On December 31st, 1944, the OB West War Diary records the entry that is as close as any wartime document comes to the sentence. The title promises, "If Bastogne cannot be taken, the offensive operation is finished." Von Rundstedt does not write this as a warning or a prediction. He writes it as a professional soldier recording what has already become true. Bastogne has held, the corridor is open, the Meuse has not been crossed, Antwerp is unreachable. German fuel reserves are exhausted. Allied reserves mass on both shoulders of the Bulge. On January 3rd, 1945, Allied forces begin a major attack from the north. Third Army continues from the south. Rundstedt informs his commanders that the offensive can no longer achieve its planned objectives. On January 8th, Hitler authorizes limited withdrawals. German forces begin pulling back from the western end of the salient. On January 16th, American troops from the 1st and 3rd Armies meet at Hufala. By January 25th, the front is largely restored to the line from which the attack began on December 16th. The Bulge disappears from the map. It leaves behind destroyed towns, frozen bodies, wrecked vehicles on roadsides that will not be cleared until spring, and German reserves that cannot be rebuilt. American casualties for the broader Ardennes campaign total approximately 76,000 killed, wounded, captured, and missing. Third Army alone suffers more than 35,000 casualties during its counteroffensive. German losses are comparable, with hundreds of tanks and assault guns and aircraft that Germany has no remaining capacity to replace. Patton receives enormous credit, and much of it is deserved. He anticipates that Third Army may need to move north before anyone tells him to move north. He orders movement before the mission is formally assigned. He accepts the risk of a rapid turn with inadequate preparation because the alternative is a delay the garrison cannot afford. He presses his commanders without relief when the timetable slips. But the relief is not the product of one man. Hobart Gay and the Third Army staff translate an order into fuel routes, artillery positions, maintenance schedules, and traffic control. Eisenhower halts other offensives and redirects forces. Devers extends his front so Patton can disengage. Milliken coordinates the 3rd Corps. Agafy directs the 4th Armored Division through 3 days of partial failure without losing the thread of the objective. Abrams and Jacques stand beside a road and make the decision that bypasses the plan and finds the route the plan missed. Dwight dismounts under fire and clears mines with his hands. Boggess drives through smoke towards soldiers he cannot yet identify. Patton creates urgency. An army converts urgency into movement. The two things are not the same. Rundstedt's position reveals what happens when the relationship between urgency and movement breaks down. He is experienced enough to see that the operation exceeds what Germany possesses. He writes it clearly in September and again in December, but the German command system in 1944 cannot translate professional judgment into altered orders when the orders come from Hitler. Model understands the problem and obeys. Manteuffel warns about fuel and roads and time and attacks anyway. German tactical skill at the unit level remains formidable. What fails is the system above the unit, where an officer can identify impossibility but cannot stop political authority from demanding it. Rundstedt understands the arithmetic. Hitler controls the wager. The exact sentence history assigned to Rundstedt matters less than the reality it is trying to describe. Patton's relief appears impossible because of everything it actually requires: the disengagement under fire, the move across winter roads, the demolished bridges, the unscouted terrain, the garrison that may fail before the column arrives. The first attacks do fail. Martelange costs a day. Chaumont is a defeat. Christmas passes without contact. The relief succeeds when commanders at several levels abandon the expectation of a perfect advance and exploit the one opening that presents itself through a village that was not in the original plan, with 6 vehicles that became separated from their support. That is the lesson Bastogne preserves. Tactical impossibility is not a permanent condition. It is a description of the gap between the time available and the force prepared. Rundstedt sees that Germany cannot close that gap with the means remaining. Patton closes it on the American side by beginning movement before preparation is complete, accepting the disorder that comes with speed and trusting subordinates to solve the problems that headquarters cannot anticipate. The approach is costly. It does not guarantee success, but it allows Third Army to do in 7 days what a more cautious command might require weeks to organize. Bastogne does not have weeks, it barely has days. The final image is not a general looking at a map. It is Boggess inside a tank, looking through a vision port at shapes, emerging from the smoke, not certain whether they are American or German. It is Dwight on his knees on a road with a burning half-track behind him, lifting mines with his hands, while fire comes from the trees. It is an engineer of the 326th Airborne standing up from a foxhole and watching a Sherman with a white star come out of the smoke and snow, 6 vehicles, a 300-yard gap behind them, a village still burning, a mile back. Armies continue fighting on both sides of the corridor. Headquarters continue issuing orders so that soldiers continue executing and dying to fulfill. The battle for the corridor lasts another month. Men freeze in foxholes within a mile of the road that is supposed to represent their relief. But at 4:50 on the afternoon of December 26th, 1,944, a siege becomes a corridor. And what every senior commander on both sides had reason to doubt becomes the narrowest possible proof that wars is decided not by the plans that survive contact unchanged, but by the people who find another way forward after every plan has broken.